Hey y'all, happy Wednesday. Happy Wednesday. It is so good to be back here with y'all, and I'm not going to take up too much time with the intro because you all know what I'm going to be sharing this month. And so today it's all about my childhood trauma. And so I, decided I'm not going to do notes. I'm not going to have a list. Usually I have something, and if I showed you my little setup here, you would see I don't have any notebook, any Post-its. That's my signatures, Post-its, because I really want to just speak from the heart. And so here we go. Yeah, childhood trauma. It can be a little uncomfortable talking about sometimes, right? Just because you recognize that it can open wounds for people. It can hit a space for people that, frankly, some people are just not ready to share, discuss, open up. Some people have suppressed way back in their mind. And so again, if you know that you could be triggered by certain things, please stop watching. Because that is not the aim here, to trigger anybody. I am just sharing my testimony in hopes to let other people know, number one, you're never by yourself. There's nothing new under the sun. People have been dealing with certain issues and stuff for a very long time. And some things we take for granted that, oh, people just know. But there is so much power. I know that without a shadow of a doubt, there's so much power in sharing your testimony and making sure that other people know they are not alone. Because sometimes the isolation can be lethal. Isolation can be lethal. So I have just decided that I'm not the one. I am not going to hide anymore. I'm not going to be afraid anymore. And so I start here. So I would say around the age of five, I was with trusted people for my family, and trusted people. And when I say my family in this sense, I'm talking about my mother and my father, my immediate, the people that I lived with every single day. So trusted people for my parents, I'll say that, for my parents. And I remember watching TV and someone started touching me in a way that I knew was not right. And if you knew me, I was pretty receptive of things, even as a young child. So I knew, even though I couldn't articulate at that time what was happening, that I was being sexually fondled, right? I was being touched. Some people might say groped, in a way that was inappropriate for a child. And I knew that something was wrong with it. I knew something was off with it, but I just didn't know how to articulate it. So I didn't say anything, right? I don't think I ever opened my mouth, right, to say, Mom, Dad, this happened, right? So again, that was around the age of 5 years old. So then let's just travel up the road 2 years. And I remember very distinctly, very distinctly, that I was sitting on the couch. My dad at the time was working overnight at the fire station because he was on rescue and engine, and that's just how their schedules were. And he was coming home, and my mom, probably after a long day of work or whatever, can't remember that detail, right, was just relaxing upstairs. I'm watching TV, 7 years old, right? And I remember flipping. There were no parental controls at that time. So when you flip, you could flip to anything. And I happened to flip onto some porn. And I remember looking like, whoa, what are they doing, right? Immediately in my body, I knew this is for adult people. But just as we are created, my mind focused on what they were doing. My mind was paying attention to what they were doing. And of course, I would learn later they're having sex, right? A very animated and artistic and dramatic form of that. Not to say that it isn't for you married folks, because we're going to keep it holy over here. But for me at that age, right, no clue about it. I just knew they're doing something that adults do. And I heard the front door, and at our old house, we had a indoor porch, a screened in porch, and then you would come into the house from that. So I heard that open, and I immediately flipped the TV off because I knew it was wrong. But your 7-year-old self is not going to put together, like, you should probably change the channel too. So my dad comes in, so happy, so excited to be home. Hey, baby, how you doing? Hey, Dad, what you doing sitting down here? Nothing. Okay, turn the TV on. Of course, I turn the TV on. These people are going at it. And my dad, like, flips a gasket. Get upstairs. What are you doing? You know, and immediately I'm triggered because I knew it was what adults do. I knew somewhere instinctively inside, like, this is not for me. But I didn't know that kind of reaction would come out of my dad. I just knew, like, whoa, I'm in trouble. Went upstairs. It took my dad a while to come to my room. And my mom told me, you know, later that she just was kind of like, Morse, do you even think she understands what she's watching? Like, she doesn't even know what this is, right? Because my parents didn't talk to me about sex. We never brought it up. I mean, I'm 35. Thanks for all the birthday love again. Still haven't had a conversation full out with my mother, right? Me and Dad, never full out conversation. There was always little innuendos and things like that, but never a good, healthy conversation with a man about sex, right? So he blew up. My mom was able to calm him down. He came to me, Jasmine, we don't do that. That's not for your eyes. That's not what you're watching, right? You don't need that. And it was to that effect. To age appropriate level, I'll give him that, that we just don't do it. So mind you, I just knew, don't do this again. So from that day, again, very distinctive, I knew that I didn't want to watch that again, right? 7-year-old me knew I didn't want to watch that again. Go up the road a little bit more. Well, actually, before I do that, let me just say around the age of 7, so 6, 7, I always get that fuzzy, y'all, because my brain just with the math, and I need to really remember it, but I don't. I received the Holy Ghost. I was baptized in Jesus' name. I spoke in tongues. That was my experience in receiving Christ and understanding that I now had him as a part of my life. Only God knew that I needed that at that time, because no one knew the other things that I had experienced to that point. And I just remember, you know, knowing I wanted it, but again, not really understanding the full gravity of just God's omniscience and how I needed his presence in my life at that age for everything I was going through. So now traveling up the road from 7 and the whole incident with my dad to 12. Yeah, to 12. Again, I was with some trusted people for my parents, and it was a co-ed gathering. And at this gathering, you know, you had the sleepovers and stuff, and of course, the girls and the boys were not together, but as everyone is all together, you know, you have different points in time where you can connect with somebody if you want to, right? Now, me, I was never that girl. I was never the one that was like in the boys' face trying to be, you know, like, look at me, like me, because I grew up with them, you know, bullied a lot, you know, one of the guys, I roughhouse, I was like the tom girl, always running around with skirts and the dresses on and trying to keep up with them. So I never was the girl that was like, ooh, look at me, pay attention to me. Which probably goes to why sometimes I was very awkward, and still coming out of that. I'm not quite as awkward, but I can be very shy when it comes to those situations initially. Because I just, you know, growing up, I never was taught, like, you know, own it, girl. Be in the presence of them and stay ladylike, right? Keep it popping, but, you know, all that. And I remember I was just sitting there minding my business. And someone came over to me where I was with my sleeping bag, and sat in there with me and began to touch me, right, underneath the blanket. And I remember when the person did it, it was like, you better not tell nobody. You better not tell nobody that I'm doing this. And of course, I'm like, this feels weird again, because I'm not this girl. Like, that wasn't me. But I was afraid because it was, you better not say nothing. And so I didn't say anything. I didn't tell the adults that were present. I didn't tell any of my friends that were around me. Of course, none of my family. But at 12, stuff was stirring in me, because I knew I was being touched in a way that was making me feel something that I hadn't felt before. I don't know why I'm feeling like this. You kind of get through those things where it's like, I like this feeling. I like what this feels like, but I know it's bad. And that's a big lesson there in itself, because these things are very natural for our bodies to react and respond to touches and things, especially, of course, I'm going to say in marriage, right? And in the relationship sanctioned by God. And even just with your family members, when you love people, whether it's parent to child, whether it's sibling love, I think sometimes because we don't share and express like these are the right relationships or the healthy relationships, when you go through a traumatic experience like that and you're assaulted sexually, right? And I choose my word carefully because it was just assault, right? Thankfully, this is my testimony that I had wherewithal to know to get away from this person where it did not escalate. And in other situations, especially by that age, I knew you need to stay away from said individuals, people like this, whatever. But because the conversation was not had with me about what's healthy, what's not, what's appropriate, what's not, it really messed up my mind towards men. It really messed up my mind towards my interactions with them and what they wanted from me. What they wanted from me physically, to the point where as I grew up, as I got older, I remember one time for my dad, who definitely did not want to have those conversations with me. He was like, you're going to have to ask God to help you, because you have such a bad attitude towards marriage and stuff. Because in my mind, all you want is to have sex with me. You want to touch me. You want me to have a baby for you. That's it, because that's all we saw. That's all you connected with it. Right. And you didn't realize that the relationship between a man and a woman, it is not just about the physical intimacy and aspect of sex and of reproducing children, but there is a greater level of intimacy that's emotional and mental and production and reproduction with a man and a woman that has nothing to do with just giving birth. Right. There is so much that God wants us to do as a team in the earth, to fulfill in the earth. And at that time, you don't know that. You're so young, right? So my mind was warped a bit because once I was more aware that these things had happened because it happened to me, I saw other friends and people who were dealing with this, who were being hurt, who were being sexually assaulted, but it was escalated, rape, molestation. And I was just like, oh my God, I realized like even in my trauma, God, I am blessed because you spared me in that. And who knows what my mind would have done. Like God knows what some people can get through and what others can't, and I just give God thanks because I definitely did not expect to have to go through those things. I was angry with God a very long time. I would say even up until the year after my dad passed, really working through, you caused me to go through this. You caused me to have to experience these things. If you were there, why didn't you, save me? Why didn't you help me? And I started that healing process before my dad left, but I had to get through that and finish that after my dad passed. And it was hard because while I was able to share things with my dad, and I was glad that we came to a kumbaya, because a lot of people don't get that. I'm very grateful. I still had to walk through that journey by myself. And even now, talking to my mom about it, I can see when, she gets a little uncomfortable sometimes, because it's like no parent wants to think like I let that happen to my child, right? But no parent ever does. When your child is with people or in situations that you feel they'll be watched, there's a careful eye on them, sometimes things are still missed, right? And so I'm glad I was able to tell my parents, and even one of the individuals who was around when all that happened, who just didn't know. It's not your fault, right? There's nothing you could do. It wasn't your action, right? But it also is a reminder, like, we have to be more diligent. We have to pay attention. We have to ask the questions, pay attention to behaviors, because I'm telling you, between that time, not only I was being bullied, like at school, with the guys I grew up with. I was being told I was ugly, I was too fat, and I'm telling you, if I could see that girl now, my God, okay? Your body changes and fat moves in different places, you know what I mean? Like from when you're a kid, but it's just like, yeah, sis wasn't bad, right? I was just a little thick, okay? And you internalize those things. And so I became a bully to protect myself. I fought people, I cussed people. I did all those things because I, felt I needed to protect myself, not just from what people were saying, but from, this will never happen to me again. You will never violate me again. Like, and y'all, if I told you like where my mind would go sometimes, like, woo, like, please come up on me, because I'm ready. Like, you really got to ask God to help you when you experience such trauma. And again, I can't imagine when it's even more, because I'm very hypervigilant. I pay attention. I may not say something about a specific thing at first, but I'm watching, I'm prepared, I'm armed up. I'm like, God, don't ever let me be caught slipping. And when it comes to my babies, the people that I love, I'm even watching out there, because it's just like, I was so scared in a way this would happen to someone else. And so again, all these things happened and I never said anything. I did not bring it up until I was 30. And so as you can imagine, there were a lot of things in between there that I experienced, that I struggled with, things I'm overcoming to this day because of the result of the emotional trauma and baggage that I experienced as a result of those physical assaults. And so that childhood trauma, it really has led me to where I am today when I talk about youth voice and giving them opportunity to speak, letting them have their moment to share with you, putting yourself in a position where I'm not going to get upset, right, at them for saying something. Because I've had people get upset, places where I thought I was safe to say a thing, and they got upset with me for whatever reason, different reasons, right? And it's just like, whoa, okay, because of your expectation of me or because of your own experience. But clearly I recognize that's not a safe place. And so you get quiet, you clam up again. But I have literally been on this journey where God is helping me to connect with the right people. Because when you go through something like that, you have to be in the care of the right persons, because that makes all the difference. It makes all the difference. So I hope that if you have experienced something like this, that you are finding yourself in a space where you can reach out to someone in your close circle, in your close space, ask God to help you, ask God to touch your heart and to show you where he was in those moments. And I'm going to share a little bit about that towards the end, because that's what God really had to do to me to help me begin my healing journey and to embrace the fact that some of this stuff, it wasn't my fault, but now it's my responsibility to overcome and be free of the residual effects of that trauma. So I pray the same for you. I love you, and I'll see you next week.